Leon Przybyla is the Associate Director of Technology Transfer at BYU and has had a long and colorful career that spans many different dimensions and aspects of the world of technology. An increasingly important world as developing nations try to acquire the ability to develop their industry, their physical and human capital that they believe leads them on the pathway to fully developed status. I'm going to just go over some of the highlights of his long career in this area. From his bachelor's degree at BYU, microbiology and chemistry, 1968, the Instrument Society of America, where he was a senior member, 1975. In the state of California, professional engineer dealing with control systems and engineering. Again, the Instrument Society of America, Level 3 certified control systems technician. Owner and founder of an import-export business, Precision Parts Incorporated. Co-owner and founder, Machine Tool Parts. Merrick Confectionery Company, founder and board member. Reliant Sales, founder and owner, technical sales and startup consulting. Computer Edge, vice president of sales, technical software startup, until today, associate director of technology transfer. We welcome Brother Przybyla and look forward to his discussion of business and technology transfer in China. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all being here. I'm just excited to be here. My name is, again, Leon Przybyla, but that sounds strange to everybody here that knows me because I go by the name Priz. P-R-I-Z is the phonetic portion of my last name, Przybyla. So certainly welcome to all call me Priz. I really appreciate that. Basically, as an introduction, I've been here at BYU for 3 years in technology transfer and working a little bit in the side of creative works as well. So I have experience in both sides. But formerly, as is pointed out, I was a businessman and entrepreneur. Started a number of companies. Happy to say that every one of them made some money. Not a lot of money in most cases, but made some money, so I never lost money on those. However, and some did very well. The candy company is one of the largest candy companies in the United States right now. So it is something I just sold out my ownership in about a year ago. The work in China started with me in my manufacturing rep company, which I was representing process controls and instrumentation. And I worked in China about 8 or 10 years ago. Had a great experience working with them in the early years when technology transfer and doing business over in China was not in vogue. It was something that you went over there and got a real education on terms of doing business with foreigners. I applied for the Kennedy Grant for a specific reason. In our office, normally speaking, we do primarily most of our technology transfer. And what does that really mean? Basically, it's the commercialization of the intellectual property of the university. So all the patents, the copyrights, the softwares, all of that stuff, our office is responsible for commercializing, getting out to market. Normally speaking, most universities, and most that I know of, work primarily in the U.S. In other words, most of their licensing opportunities, most of their startups, everything that they've got going are done pretty much in the U.S. Some institutions that are state-owned are regulated by state law, which requires them to do licensing in the states only. BYU being a private institution, we have the option of doing what we want with our intellectual property. And so we've made it an effort now to try to maybe do some international marketing. Our school has an international school. We have linguistics here. We're very strong throughout the world. So why not, as a university that's universal, do work in all countries? And so that was the reason for the grant. I wanted to get a chance to go over there and see what the opportunities were in China, because I'd had some experience doing business there, but now I wanted to go over there and try with early technology and with startup type of operations. I had a friend by the name of J.Y. Wong, who was a Ph.D. in agronomy and meteorology, ended up being the chairman of the department at San Jose State University. when he retired many years ago, he actually went over with President Nixon to open up China after the Cultural Revolution in the late 70s. And so since that time, he'd been doing speeches in the circuit in China, but then he decided to start his own company and do business in China, probably before almost anybody wanted to do business in China. We're talking really way back in the late 70s. I joined him in the early 80s to do business and to work with him over there, and he became my mentor and tutor. It was through Dr. Wang that I learned many of the caveats of doing business in China and learned many of the experiences that I had prior to coming to this university. One little story that I thought might be interesting is the story that happened at Guangzhou University. Dr. Wang was a professor, as I said, retired, and so he had a lot of contacts in the university climate. And he took me to visit a professor at Guangzhou University in mechanical engineering. And the professor did not speak any English, but Dr. Wang spoke both languages and translated. But nevertheless, he brought to me a book that he had written on mechanical engineering with materials handling. He had some new theories and designs in materials handling, and he won, and I don't remember which year it was, but he had won the Inventor of the Year award in China for this invention of materials handling. He also wrote this book that was used as a supplementary textbook in their schools, and it had much of his inventions and ideas in this book. The Chinese government at that time had, and still does, own all of the intellectual property that comes out of their universities. And so they owned this, and yet they had done nothing with it for a number of years. This was probably 10 years after he invented it, and written this book and done lectures on it, and knew that it was a primo way to do materials handling and mechanical engineering. And he handed me as a gift that book, all in Chinese, as it wouldn't do me much good, but still he gave it to me as a gift, and he asked me to take this to America and to exploit the technology, to give it to everybody, give them drawings, give them the knowledge, just give them the technology. And of course I was surprised because, first of all, he's a government employee, and second of all, it was, I'm sure their secrets, and they weren't. I'm sure the government didn't want me taking it over to the U.S. But so I asked him. I said, why are you giving this to me? Why am I getting this as something to take over? And he says, because they've never used it, and they've never developed this into an industry. And he says, my whole goal in life is for my invention is to be used. And I said, well, do you want money back? He says, no interest in money whatsoever. I just want you to acknowledge to everyone that you give it to that it's my invention. And I passed that book on to San Jose State University at the time, and to the professors there. And I believe they did look at some of the drawings and so forth and have used some of those ideas. I asked them also to please give recognition to this Chinese inventor about this thing. That was my first experience with technology transfer going our direction instead of going the direction of China. And I learned that technology in those days was not being exploited unless the government had a specific plan for it, or if it was military, or if it was defense or something like that. This was materials handling, had nothing to do with those, so therefore was not of the great concern that most of their other technologies were. Another part of my experience here is that the state of Utah has an office in China that they pay for as a consultant. A gentleman by the name of Sean Hu. And Sean is paid by the state of Utah yearly on a contract to try to develop Utah businesses over in China. He is free to anybody who is a Utah resident or Utah company, but he also works with the more prominent institutions like the universities and so forth, and that's how I got to know Sean. Knowing from my prior experience that having somebody on the ground in China, not just flying over there every 6 months, was extremely important. I made close friendships with Sean and indicated to him we'd like to have him work with us as a university in some of our technology transfer. And so he immediately came to visit us and learned about what we had and went back to China to start the ball rolling. So it was in March and April of this year that I went to China. We went for 2 weeks of pleasure. I took the opportunity to take some time to see the country and 2 weeks of business. We visited the cities of Guangzhou, Guilin, Chongqing, Yichang, Wuhan, Xi'an, Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu. So we did quite a circuit there through China and saw many of their cultural things as well as their business opportunities. In general information, a little bit about China. I'm sure many of you know something about it, but just in general. Population in 1999 was 1.2 billion. They have done a number of reforms in business. They are starting to do privatization of small and medium-sized businesses, and so they are doing, basically a capitalism. Before 1996, the government housing was all owned by the government, but after 1996 and through to 1998, they required everybody to buy their house, so that it became private ownership. So we found some of those prices to be rather interesting. They were fairly low, but still, the private ownership is the key. In other words, to have private ownership. The Chinese currency, yuan, had two currencies when I first went over there, the RMB and the yuan. The RMB was for foreigners, and it had equal value to the yuan, but they've combined those now, and so it's fairly stable currency. Their growth this year will be about 6% gross national product growth, and that will be probably the highest in the world. And so even during these troubled times, China continues to grow at a magnificent rate. The legal system is improving, particularly with their soon to enter in the WTO, World Trade Organization. And however, they have an interesting caveat on their technology transfer that I found out about when I was over there, and that is that if they do a licensing agreement with you, they believe that after 10 years they own the technology. So irregardless of how long your patents last or the life of the patents and so forth, most of their contracts are signed that they, and it's pretty much their law, that after 10 years the technology reverts to them entirely. So they do have some laws that even though we have some respect for patents for 20 years and copyright for longer, that they are different. And so they're not completely in line with the rest of us. In terms of patents and copyright, they're improving. Their Supreme Court ruled last year that the material on the Internet is copyrighted. So that's the first time that they've started to admit that some of the material that is published on the Internet is copyrighted. However, 10% of all the patent filings in China are domestic. 10%. Majority of the 74,000 patents that were filed last year were Japan, U.S., and Germany in that order. The number one patent in China, or the most common type of patent in China, is data reserve and mobile telecom. Those are the two most important things. In the top 100 Chinese IT companies, only 44 have filed any patents at all. The Vice Director of the State Information Center, Liu He, says that they're going to put in about $500 billion in the next 5-year plan to IT, to develop IT. That increases from 4.5% of their budget to 7% by the year 2005. He has warned them all that as they give this money out, that they need to be concerned about IT protection. So the Chinese are trying to move in a direction more secure than their past. The Wall Street Journal said just recently that private companies right now in China, nearly one-half, they are responsible for nearly one-half of Chinese economic output. So as communist as that country is, and it may not be as much as you think it is, capital, basically our type of environment with free capital work is taking over there. Now, what are we doing specifically with BYU and technology transfer over in China? When I had the opportunity of meeting with Sean over there on the first trip, it became apparent to me that one of the main things that we could do as transfer from BYU over there would be high-tech engineering and ESL, English as a second language. And as we got into more discussions with more people, it turned out that the ESL seemed to be better than I ever thought it would be, as I'll point out to you. It was decided at that time that we'd put on a training conference where BYU would be part of an entourage that would train 130 teachers for 3 weeks in August in the Xinjiang School District, which is in Beijing. It was difficult because of the time that I had to do this in, to get time committed from professors here that are active at BYU. So I was suggested I go to a retired professor by the name of Dr. Robert Blair, who is from the linguistics department. And Dr. Blair is magnificent. He also connected me with Dr. Richard Aslett, who is professor from UVSC, who is working in the Provo School District right now to do testing some of his theories on teacher training in ESL. Thank goodness for those two professors. I was able to line them up to come with me to be with the entourage. We had one professor from NYU. We had 4 teachers from the University of Utah. So the group was the group that went there and taught these 130 teachers in teaching English as a second language. All of these teachers were English teachers, and they had various degrees of capability, some in the very early stages, and I mean not really early stages, but say in the low intermediate, and some that were advanced. And it just depended on the experience that they had. But what was interesting, as you went around and met with each of those teachers, and I met with a lot of them, and shook hands with a lot of them, I found that not one of them had ever been to America, or to Britain, or to Australia to practice their English. The Chinese government is very tight on visas. They're very restrictive. They don't allow a lot of people to leave, and for those purposes, they're just not letting them go just to be practicing their English. Because of that meeting with these teachers, we had a wonderful success story. The teachers loved what we did. The word got spread to the governments, both in Hunan province, which is down in the western side, and in Beijing and throughout China, that we were there, and visitors came, dignitaries, and many of them talked to us afterwards about potential of utilizing some of BYU's capabilities. One of the things that I decided to do is that we don't do business on BYU's campus for liability purposes and other reasons, but so I decided to get a company started, and I had Dr. Blair start a company to do our first contract with the Chinese government. And this is to prepare a coursework for K through 12 in learning English as a second language. The Chinese government has mandated that all students in K through 12 will be learning English, and they would like it to be, and this is quite a challenge, would like it to be so that when you graduate from high school that you're bilingual, not just English as a second language. And you speak fluently both languages. And they know that their current methodology in teaching is not producing that. I can't say that it's not good, but I would say that they're right, that in the actual usage of the language and speaking the language and pronunciation and vocabulary is probably needed to be improved upon. Dr. Blair is certainly one of the fine experts in this area of early childhood education in foreign languages, and he is preparing a lesson plan which we plan to try to get certified. Now, certification, what is that? Well, China's decided that since their plan did not work to meet this goal of bilingual students, that they would put it out to any company that wanted to compete, or any place that wanted to compete on providing content, to give them samples by February of this next year and be taught in a class as a test for the next semester. They start their second semester after the Chinese New Year in March. And then at that end in summer to then take an analysis of the success of that program and then determine who would be certified as a potential for the first time in their history as a supplier of content to their educational system that is outside government control. In other words, they certify them, but it does not have to be printed by the government, written by the government, and devised by the government. We are submitting first grade and via first grade lesson plan. We are also going to teach the class with the help of Dr. Blair, and we hope to get early acceptance of this technology. Just to give you some idea of the volume here, as I said, there are 130 million elementary school children in China. The Chinese government lets you charge up to $4 per workbook, and they require the students to buy them every year. So if you got the whole market, and who knows how these 14 who will be certified, but if you got the whole market, you're talking a $500 million a year company providing just content to some of their all of the classes. I had to start a second company with Dr. Aslett, which will be for teacher training. You cannot have automatic success in teaching these methodologies without training the teachers. So Dr. Aslett has got a company going which will do to train the teachers. He had the experience of how hard it is to teach teachers in this August training meeting we had. And so he's made some plans on how to do that. And he is an expert in this field. And they need to be trained in our new methodology because the methodology they're using does not work. Then he is looking at other opportunities like training teachers for the Olympics. I'll get into more of that later. And training teachers for business and business English. So those opportunities are coming up down the line. Now e-schooling. How well is China doing in e-schooling? Well, they're going much faster than you would think. The statistics that I found are interesting. And from July 2000 through March 2001, China had 240,000 students online from 38 universities. From March then of 2001 till now, 8 more universities have been certified. By 2005, they anticipate that 100 universities will be giving degrees to 5 million students online. Be an online degree. And it is estimated from their own statistics that it takes about $6 million to establish an online school in China. And Peking University, which has one of the leading online schools, has put $8.4 million into their school already. So it's an upfront investment of a lot of money with a downstream potential that's huge. Huge if you're talking that many degrees. BYU is currently interested in working with 30 new universities established by the government to do online training, but the significant difference between the other 38 or now, 46 universities is that these universities will teach 1/2 of their courses in English. That's the difference. So 30 universities are being set up now, established by the government mandate, to teach 1/2 of their courses in English. Of course, that gives us as BYU an opportunity. As you know, we have a number of online courses. Each of those now is probably eligible for licensing over in China to work with the Chinese government in their schools. Another one of the things that we had an opportunity to meet with is I met with Yao Wang, who is the chairman of the 2008 Beijing Olympics. He's the Mitt Romney of China. When I met with him, he indicated to me back in August that he's working closely with the Aussies because they just had the Sydney Olympics and know how to run Olympics and so on and so forth, and that they were trying to get the contract to do ESP, English for Special Purposes. In this case, it's for teaching and preparing the taxi cab drivers, the hotel personnel, government employees, the guides, and so forth, and the tourism industry and so forth in English. A rather large and expansive contract. I sat down and talked to him about BYU's capabilities, what we were doing over there, and I invited him to come to BYU. Said, I think if you come to BYU, you'll see that we can compete very well with the Aussies in terms of what they can do in this area, and we do have the capability of handling the content and so forth. So as a matter of luck, I would say he is coming to BYU on Saturday. He's just at Comdex this week and will be up here Saturday. We have a full slate of appointments for him in the morning, and then we'll be taking him up to see the Olympic venue in the afternoon up in Salt Lake. But my plan is to try to woo him over so that BYU can get that contract for the ESP application of English. It could be a very significant contract. When I was in China, I had a chance to go to a language school that was private. They have several language schools there, not hundreds of them, but maybe a dozen. And one was one I wanted to go to. It was called the Wall Street Institute. And the Wall Street Institute is interesting. It started by the company that they licensed the software from is called Sylvan Learning Systems, but it wasn't always known as that. It was started by a fellow by the name of Eccenini, who is Italian and started his first language school in Spain. So it's an interesting combination of things. But he did the EU first to do training of different languages in the EU, but added in English, of course, to do training in English through all of Europe. He got very big and sold off his company to Sylvan Learning Systems a year or two ago for $270 million. In the process, he negotiated to get exclusive franchise to China. And probably the smartest thing I've ever seen in my life. After he walks away with $270 million, wait till you hear this. He gets into China, and he actually started teaching in March of this year. I was there in August, so you got a period of short amount of months. By that time, they had 3,000 students at the institute that I visited. There were another 2,000 students that were as a second spot that had only been running for 3 months. And he's charging them $2,500 U.S. per student to take 64 modules of English. Translates into a nice round figure of $12.5 million in less than 6 months. That's the need to learn English over there. It is so big that they're willing to put out money that I didn't even think the Chinese had, but they find it some way, somehow to afford this. He started Shanghai the month I was there. August was opening Shanghai and had some pre-sign-ups of about 3,000 students. So you can do the math. He's got another almost $6 million. I was significantly impressed at the volume of business that could be done in such a short period of time in English in China, just from seeing the Wall Street Institute. But I noticed that they had a narrow focus on the amount of software they're using. Sylvan's Learning Systems, the stuff that Eccenini designed over in Europe, and it was not doing quite the job that I thought it should do. It was very flashy and very multimedia, very well done, don't get me wrong. But I don't think it was accomplishing the goal. It's not, teaching English is not something you just go out there and start talking to somebody. It's a difficult language to teach. And our professors have come up with some very strong methodologies. And so with our softwares and stuff, I believe that we can be much more successful in that market. We don't need to charge that much money, because if you look at a school that competes with Wall Street but only charges $75, they got 300,000 students. So you see, the masses will come if you give them the right price. So I think it's a combination maybe between the two. If you're going to do business English to adults, you can charge more. If you're going to do it to students and just do an adjunct learning to the students, then you can charge less. BYU has a desire now to work with a company over there to start up a language institute. The company will be licensing whatever we have from us, but they'll be taking other stuff as well to make their institute more lifelike for the whole of the students. And to help this along, our partner over there has just hired away the vice president of Wall Street Institute, and who's right under Mr. Eccenini. He's Chinese, Charles Wu, and they're 5 best employees. Now, if that doesn't tell you how strong a position we have, then you need to rethink business, because if you take the 5, 6 best employees from a company, and then obviously you've got the heads-up opportunity there, and they're going to provide and put together centers more closely associated with our English language center training. So it'll be a little different than Wall Street. Pricing will be different and so forth. But then we'll be providing content and doing technology transfer. The next company that I met with is H&J Vanguard in Consulting. They're the #1 management consulting company in China. They don't call them the Fortune 500. They call them the listed 1,000, the top listed 1,000 companies in China. And they do business with the top listed 1,000. And they currently do management training in Chinese. But what they want to do is add, of course, English, teaching English to business people. And what better partner could they have than BYU? And I've tried to convince them that this would be the wise choice, to go with somebody like BYU to provide that kind of content. The company was started by 4 professors from Xiamen University, which is one of their business schools in China. And so they're business-oriented with most of their content. But when we showed them our accounting program, which has been done on CD-ROM, they were delighted to see that and said that they could easily localize that and use that as well. So it has other potential for other possible language courses over there. The next person we met with was the president of the Foreign Language Press, which is the largest press in China. To impress us, he told us that they printed 30,000 tons of paper a day. So that's how much paper they print. That's a lot of paper. He is also on the board of directors for the Beijing Foreign Language University. And he spoke first, and as you know, as braggers speak, the one that speaks first loses. He spoke first and started bragging about what their university does and told us that they had 31 languages they taught, that all their ambassadors were trained at their foreign language in the university, and currently they were using the Oxford Press technique and books from the Oxford Press. He also bragged that the President Jimin had ordered that all ministers, all 14 of them, ages 45 to 57 years of age, just so you know their age group, would now be required to go into a 3-month extensive training course in English. They would be sequestered for 12 hours a day learning English. They had been a month into the program when I got there. And he says, you know, he's having some problems with the students. This gentleman spoke perfect English, British English, but perfect English. And he says he's having some problems. He's getting to be able to do greetings by the end of the first month, and how are you, and you know, my name is, and so forth. And he says, I'm having some problems. His company, in order to promote English now with this prestige that they have, is putting 300 million yuan, and you divide that by 8, so you're looking at about, $25 million into an English training school that will be a new language training center. Their goal is very unique. They're going to train teachers, and they're going to use, of course, in their training, their materials. Currently, he's aligned with Oxford Press, which means it's going to be the British materials, but it's interesting. We're working on them. It may change. It depends on how successful we are in a couple contracts. This school will be completed in 2 years and be able to house 1,000 students at a time, and again, it'll be for training teachers. This is for the purpose of training teachers for all of the students in China. And I mentioned 130 million elementary school students. There are 217 million total students K through 12. So basically, almost close to the population of the United States is their student population. We had the opportunity at the end of our trip to go to Chengdu University, and we visited with their technology transfer department, some of their engineers and so forth, and had an opportunity to visit with them. We learned some interesting things about technology transfer on the university level and tried to make some close relationships with them where we could continue those throughout the future. We also went to Peking University and visited with the business school. We signed an agreement there, and that was a significant agreement with Sean's company that has to do with training in English and so forth at the university. We met with the Deputy Minister of Education, Dr. Li, who is actually head of all technology transfer for the whole country, and is a significant contact for us. Now, in all of these meetings, we learned several things. One is that the IP is owned by the government, that licensing is done. They already do some licensing, but that they have compensation to the inventors now, some compensation to the inventors. They have some standards in licensing fees, which they charge, but they don't like royalties. They prefer to have an upfront fee and not royalties. And they have a few success stories and what they're doing in terms of transfer of technology. We suggested, because they're in early stages of technology transfer, that we set up an exchange program where they send over one of their better technology transfer people from a university to work here for a couple of months, and we go there and work with them for a couple of months. And this is still in the mill. It has a good possibility we can set up that close relationship with them. The future. What does the future bring in China? The IP protection right now is primitive, And although they're taking steps to try to make that better with the entrance in the WTO, my suggestion in terms of the future is for you to be careful in anything you do over there in terms of intellectual property. You can take steps. As an example, what are we doing if we give away most of our stuff? I'm talking about in ESL software. And so if we took it over there, you know that in a matter of a short period of time be copied and reproduced and sent off. So our plan is not to allow that, and by what we'll plan on doing is doing like Wall Street. Set up classrooms, have the software in computers on workstations so there is no way to copy it, and the students come into the workstations. So the plan is to not allow it to be distributed. And that one way is a possibility that we think to prevent piracy of the software. The market, as I've already explained, is staggering in size. You have the 217 million students K through 12. You have over 1,000 plus universities. Most importantly, I think now is the time to move. And why do I feel that? Well, look at what's happening. All the ministers required to learn English, their entrance into the WTO. They have the Olympics in 2008. They have the K through 12 mandate to learn English. They have online education, which will be literally millions of students. And what is good right now is they basically have one customer right now, that being the government. It could get, with capitalization there, it could be privatized soon, and you have more than one customer eventually. But right now, we're dealing in education with ESL with one customer. The next thing is there is a pro-business requirement. As I mentioned, there's a 6% GNP right now. There's privatization going on, especially in the small and medium-sized business. They include 1/2 of the economic growth in the IT industry. ESL is at a strong interest right now. They realize that to do business anywhere around the world, that they've got to speak another language other than Chinese. In this case, they believe thoroughly that it's English. And BYU should be joining on this because BYU is a leader in technology transfer in the U.S. Just a little plug for our office. If you take the amount of dollars that we get for research every year and divide that by the amount of return we get on our licensing agreements, we have continually scored #1 in the U.S. We don't get a lot of money, and we get a pretty significant amount of return. So we, in terms of Chinese, they always like to work with the best. They always point out that our accounting school, if I go over there, they point out to me, they already know that our accounting school is rated #1 or 2. And they know that, and they know the ratings, and they know where you are, and they know we're leaders in TT. So we should be working with them. They know we're the leader. They'd rather work with us. Stanford has been over there several times trying to get into them, to work with them at TT. They have pushed them aside for now because they want to work with #1. If #1's not available, they'll work with #2 or 3, but they're looking for #1. We know that BYU, as I remember I told you about who's one-upsmanship with the director of the foreign press. I explained to him we have 65 languages. So they're 31, and that about, Chinese just do not like to lose face, and I didn't mean that to have him lose face, but this guy, it took him several sentences to regain his strength. He could not believe somebody had beaten them in the actual language, and I explained to him, we're not allowed to proselyte over there, but it came up as a matter of conversation that we talked about, 3 months teaching your ministers to learn English. Well, guess what? We take 3 months to teach our missionaries to learn English or learn foreign languages. And he says, well, how good are they? And I had Dr. Blair with me, and he says, well, they're about level 5 when they come out of that school. Level 6 is the highest. And that absolutely floored him. There's no way you could be teaching anybody to a level 5 after 3 months of language training. And no matter, I said, you do 12 hours a day? Yeah, we do that. And he says, well, we do too. And he says, there's just no way you could be that good. And so he's planning to visit the United States. Guess where the one place he wants to go? MTC. Now, that should be interesting to have a high dignitary from China going over to the MTC, and I'm certainly going to set it up. And guess what those people over there will be speaking when they talk to him in Chinese? The gospel. what else do they know? They don't know anything about technology. They don't know anything about, the birds and the bees. So they are going to be talking about the gospel. And I can't wait to bring this guy in and talk the gospel. He would not let us get off the subject. He wanted to know more about missionaries, the missionary program, how good it was, why these missionaries went out. And we were all the time waiting for a little bell to ring underneath the table where we were taken away by guards, because it is against the law to preach religion over there. So we have the opportunity now with people, dignitaries, coming to visit our school. And by the way, I will be taking the Beijing leader over to the MTC as well to show him that our language training at the MTC. So also, we're a private university. A private university means that, we do pretty much what we want. We have the regulations as much as the state institutions. And the state of Utah has been paying for our guanxi. Now, what is guanxi? Guanxi is a Chinese word that is extremely important. And if you ever do any business in China, that is a word that you should memorize, learn, know, and be able to repeat time and time again. Guanxi is your network, your contacts, your close confidants, your friends, the way you do business in China. It is not so much doing business, again, in China. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And guanxi is who you know. So you better have guanxi. And we have been building guanxi. Through the state of Utah has been paying for that, to build guanxi. And we have contracts in place, companies that are started. Who knows what's ahead for BYU? I just think it's fantastic. Open for questions.
You mentioned that there's some sort of liability about handling business on campus, and you've opened up these two other businesses for these professors. But is there potential where BYU as a business would be making money off of these ventures? Or are these separate businesses?
We do it a different way. We do it through licensing. And licensing makes money because you get a royalty return and a licensing fee and so forth. So we do that a little bit differently. We do it through licensing fees and royalties and agreements with businesses off campus, either in China or in America or wherever. But we do make money, yes. That's why I said we have a return on our investment for our research here at the university.
I mean, like opening schools in China funded by the university.
I defer that question to President Bateman. I think you'll find that they have some concerns about opening more schools. I would like to see that, but that's not my choice. Any other questions? Yes.
If BYU does get some of these contracts, how does that affect the student population here, those people that seek that? Is that an opportunity for them to go somewhere elsewhere? Is that
As you heard the numbers, the sheer numbers of training of teachers and so forth in China, we will need bodies. And let me tell you an interesting story. This brings up an interesting story. The Chinese government is extremely, believe it or not, squeamish about the quote-unquote American teenager. They're very worried about that teenager. They're very worried about that teenager turning into a young adult and coming into their country and causing havoc. And so they believe, because they've seen through Sean, and Sean is my contact over there, he has only hired primarily all LDS, but mostly from BYU and some from University of Utah. And now he has one from Arizona State that's LDS. But he's only hired LDS. Why? Because of the standards that the LDS keep are in keeping with the culture and customs of China. And they aren't out in beer bus drinking and carousing and sex and things that just are not appropriate in China. So the Chinese believe that if BYU is involved, that all of these wonderful student teachers and helpers and trainers will be good people like the ones that have already come over there. This sets us up in a very dangerous situation if we have one or two bad apples. But by and large, they have strong faith that if we provide the teachers, that they will be of that quality that they've seen already. They're not really willing to open it up to a Stanford University. Sean told me that they fear that teenager, that young adult at Stanford for what they'll do in their country. So yes, there are going to be huge opportunities for LDS and for people at BYU. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.